Alrighty, so today I want to show you some problems that you might not be aware of in your business based on a varying level of revenue you might currently be sat around on a monthly basis. Now, these figures are based on a few different handful of clients I've had over the past couple of years, and to show you the problems they've dealt with and the symptoms that they've had to suffer from and try and have the growing pains of getting out from. So I want to show you each different situation. Obviously, the revenue might vary, but the problems are going to be very specific for you. So I want to go through each one and show you how to get to the next or desired level in your business. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alrighty, so I want to go through three different revenue levels here. And to be honest, I know it's obviously important, the figures, but the numbers here aren't really that important. It's more important here to focus on the systems or lack thereof at each level and what is the kind of symptoms causing any growing pains between each level. And absolutely, excuse me, I'm using a graphics tablet here with a pen, so I might be resorting to my mouse at some points when I need it. But I want to go straight into the 0 to 10k here because this is where 99% of people are at. And I'm going to go into a book in a while. I might reference it sooner than later, but there's a book here that's very important to each level here. And actually, this goes all the way into like franchising and conglomerate level of business. But I want to start here. So let's get my pen out. That's good. So the first level here in terms of like revenue and what you're doing in terms of like revenue per client, you probably have anywhere from, let's say, 5 to maybe 20 clients if it's going well on retainers, monthly retainers maybe. It can be one extreme or the other though. You might have a few clients paying you a lot. Like you might have 3 clients paying you maybe 1 to 2k each, or you have the other end, which is basically loads of clients paying you like 250 to 500, and so regardless of what level you have, you're still not getting above like 5-10k a month here, because again, this is where people get stuck at. They might work with a slightly larger local business or online client they find, and they sign a 1 to 2k a month deal or whatever it might be. You know, they sign one of these, or they do like I did at the very beginning, get a few smaller clients. So sure, on paper it looks kind of fancy, you've got a bundle of clients you're working with, but at the end of the day, you're never really making more than like this much per client. And so it looks, it's just, in terms of consistent high revenue, it's just not there at all. So these are the kind of financial symptoms of the business, I guess. But the main reason this is never changing is mainly because, one, there's no systems at all. Maybe you do work on systems if you're techie people, you're tech savvy, whatever it might be. You implement AI where it needs to be, or maybe things like Zapier or whatever it might be. But naturally, it's still the main problem, which is that you are the business, right? And this is something I'm actually going to kind of hit on now. I did want to hit on it a little bit later on. I will hit on the rest of it later on. I'll just hit on this bit. This is the technician stage of the E-Myth. And if you've read that book or heard any summaries, audiobooks before of it, this stage is the biggest stage for most small businesses they get stuck at. They might go to that next stage, we'll get to in a minute, around 10 to 30k, but most of them are stuck in 0 to 10k because naturally, I'm even going to highlight this, technician. If you're stuck at this stage, it's because most people start a business either out of passion for that thing, the technician, or because they just kind of need a job, they need to get something off the ground and going. And they're not necessarily business savvy, they're not necessarily focused on systems, SOPs, processes, hiring, HR, that sort of stuff. They're just focused on, let's get a few people paying me a few £100 a month, or a couple dozen people paying me £100 a month, or whatever it might be. And so they're not focused on revenues and quarters and systems and processes and pipelines and sales systems and marketing. They're focused on just their clients and what they do for a living. And that's typically why they get stuck at this level. So let's go to the next level, which is kind of like step 2 of this, or stage 2, I guess, of that same trap. So you can actually be in somewhat of the same situation, in fact, here. In fact, I can almost mirror this perfectly. So most of the situations here, again, you'll probably have the same level of clients. Most people will probably have, I would say, at least, I'd say maybe like 7 to maybe, probably 7 to 30, because again, for some people, it will just be, in fact, I'm going to put that like 7 to 20, 7 to like 25, because I was working with someone that was actually roughly at this level of of business in terms of clientele, but also you get the exact opposite level where they're at a low end and it's high retainers, whatever it might be. So this is where they're stuck at. So they either have, again, a bunch of people right there. Actually, let me start with a 7. So you have a few people paying you maybe like, I don't know, 3 to 5k a month, right? You got a few high ticket clients, or you have a few low ticket clients, which are, again, the kind of 500 to 1k. And there's nothing wrong with any of this, by the way, what I'm going through. This is just the kind of symptoms of the stage, right? And those are the retainers. Now, what's the problem here? Again, you either have little systems, so small systems in place. So you have like, what would the word be? I guess it would be small systems. Yeah, that would be a good word to use. And not much in terms of processes going on. So, you might have you plus, a VA and maybe like one closer, or maybe, you've got, one ad running or something like that. You're normally in a situation where you've got maybe 1 or 2 closers, or you've got some ads running and you've got closers to those, or you've got a small sales team and maybe you've got, 2 to 3 setters. So that means for like cold calling and things, or, calling people that are booked an appointment or whatever. And that is currently that level. So you aren't necessarily as stuck as you were if you're only making 0 to 10k, because you have more freedom and leeway to do bigger things. You can put some money into ads that you couldn't do at 0 to 10k, but you obviously can't do anything that you want to do as if you had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions to work with. You're working with maybe a few $100s here, a couple of $1,000s there, which is cool, which is great, but ultimately it's not probably where you want to be if you're at this stage. So that is currently like that level. So the business still obviously heavily relies on you, because you don't really have anything in place besides maybe one SOP for the entire team, and that's about it. So 30 to 50k. So this is really where it's like the final brink of pre-expansion here. So I've not seen any business actually not been able to immediately get out of this. Well, I say not seen many. Literally worked with a couple of them, so I don't exactly have a whole repertoire of people to prove here. But out of the couple I have been able to in person see, virtually see, it's naturally the case where as soon as they're able to get out of this situation, they either do it for a while, or they are able to just like 10x the business in like a year. Well, maybe 3 to 5x realistically at least, but 10x over maybe 5-10 years. So what happens is you probably have, again, I'm just going to put either many in this case, so maybe like 20 plus. Actually, I'm going to put 20 plus clients in terms of clientele, or again, it's the same situation. You have just few, like 5 to 20k plus. And that is in terms of, that is a terrible 5. Or you have, I'm going to just do it like that, actually. That makes more sense. There we go. So in all stages, you can see where the variable in terms of clientele is. Then in terms of actual revenues, this is bringing in, actually, I just realized what I did there. Oops. Right, let me just go back. So yeah, you have many or a few, which is, 3 to 5. That makes more sense. There we go. So now your revenue might look like you have, I don't know, let's say many would be like 1 to 2k a month again, because you do. And if it's low ticket, by the way, you kind of want to ignore this, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if it isn't low ticket and you're doing like $500 plus and like mid to high ticket delivery, this is my point. So 1 to 2k, and then probably like 5 to 20k, honestly, at the higher level, just to show you an example. So that's a terrible dollar sign. There we go. So at this point, in terms of systems, you might have a few. I'm going to put like a couple of systems, because you're not huge. Let's be honest. You're a big small business, but you're, besides maybe, I would say 5 to 25 staff. Yeah, I'm going to put 5 to 20 staff. Actually, not even that many, to be fair. But I will leave it there for now, because you might have part-timers. But that is probably where you're at in terms of revenue per client, how many systems you've got. So at this point, you might have, a few SOPs for different processes. Again, depending on the business, you might use automations. I just put autos, and you're ahead of where you were at, 10 to 30k. But between 30 and 50k, you're probably stuck at this point where you might, well, obviously, actually, you'll have maybe 1 to 2 managers. Yeah. But that is about it, really. Because at that level, it's probably like a large family-run business or a larger online business with, again, maybe you have 1 to 2 managers, or, like, let's say 3 to 5 contractors, especially if it's like an online business. And you'll resonate with this. You'll resonate with this if you're an online. Let me move this, actually. You'll resonate with this so you can actually see it better. You'll resonate with 1 to 2 managers if you've like a large local family business, and it's 3 to 5 contractors basically if you have like a larger online business, like an agency or something. So I can actually expand this out now. So yeah, at this final level, let me kind of talk about the E-Myth now a little bit. So let me just draw this. So this level, so you aren't run by the business anymore. I would say the business needs you. So business needs you, but you can step away. But you don't run day to day. Yeah, I'd say like that. You don't like steer the ship. Actually, yes, you do. Sorry, that's the wrong word to use there. You should always be steering the ship, but you don't run day to day. So the reason that's important there is because we need to highlight the fact that obviously each different level will correspond to what level of systems you have in place and how many people you have. Although you don't necessarily need people nowadays because of AI and certain systems and certain setups. But let's now talk about how to go between each level. So, like I said, I want to talk about the E-Myth here, because the reason understanding the E-Myth here can be so important is because it goes way beyond this as well. So if you can understand 5, 10, 100,000 levels ahead of this, you can easily go between, you can easily go from even just these two, let alone just that, So ultimately here, in order to be able to go from, let's say, 0 to 10, from 10 to, if you're at 7k a month right now and you want to get to 27k a month or something, you need to just look at the variables that need to change, which I'd say the main thing really is focusing on your clients. So if right now you want to change up your clients and you want to stop only working with 3 to 5 high ticket clients and you want to go to 10 to 20 low ticket, you now have to realize that, well, for a start, if your system or what you currently have as a mental process or a physical process written down doesn't work for that, that's what's got to change first, obviously. So right now, if you have offers that are only big, like pay in fulls, for instance, if you work with pay in fulls, for instance, a PIF, then you want to change that so you're not only charging for pay in fulls, or if you do, you work on the volume of pay in fulls you have, which would also massively change your revenue goal, because ultimately you could still have a low level of clients with maybe big PIFs, but if you want to change that, then maybe you just try and increase the volume of PIFs, or you go back and have no PIFs, but you just work on getting an extra 5 to 10 clients a month or something, right? So that's what you've obviously got to change there. And it's going to be the same at each level. You're just going to be adding zeros to it, basically. So how do you actually change that, though? Well, that will come down to 2 different variables. So one will, the factors that affect how you actually grow a business, basically, and this is the same for all of them. And let's come down just to below this. So the factors that affect growth. And again, this is at least on like a level I understand. Like, I don't know if you have 300k a month, 500k a month, $1 million a month. I don't know those levels. I can just speak to these ones. So you have right now, I'm going to use red for bad, green for good, obviously. So you probably either have not much time or not much money. And honestly, it's rarely going to be any different to those. And in terms of teams you might have not many staff. But actually, I'm going to remove that one because that correlates to the other two. So here is the benefit. Let me just make sure it's roughly the same size. So the reason it's so important to understand, just so simple in terms of variables here. If you don't have much time, then you probably have more money for the business. You have higher margins, more cash flow, whatever it might be, right? Even if it's just a spare 1 to 2K a month. Or you might have not much money, but you have the time or you have the staff. And that is obviously where I would say, I'm going to draw a terrible clock face, 1 to 2 hours a week. Actually, probably even more than that, to be honest. I'm going to change this to like 1 to 2 hours a day. Or delegation. I know this is where my camera is and you can't see it right now very well. But ultimately, any variable really that affects growth is changed by these two. If you don't have much time, then delegate it to someone that does have time. Or if you don't have, and use the money that you don't have. Use the money that you have because you don't have much time. And if you don't have much money, then use the time that you have. And honestly, any other variable like that, if you don't have much time or much money, you do, I promise, because there will always be a situation where if you might not think you have much money, you actually do. You just need to honestly look at your books. Like I remember I was working with a client, I still do, and to this day they actually kind of still think they don't really have much money, even though the levels just change. It's like lifestyle inflation. But naturally, a lot of people, I understand where the feeling comes from of you feel like both of these two are your situation. You have no time and no money, but you'll probably, if you actually look, have a spare, like I said, a spare 1 to 2K. You've either got a spare 1 to 2K per month coming in, or just in savings in the bank or whatever, or you have a VA to do things for you, or you have just a member of staff that's got a spare 1 to 2 hours a day. And this is where that level gets a bit bigger, because I actually want to kind of follow on the final note here, which is going to be this. And this is what's going to get you kind of out of the small business trap, so to speak, is that if you don't have time, it's terrible, I'm going to zoom in again. If you don't have time, right, or money, actually I'm just going to, if you don't have time, your team should. I'm going to put should there as a caveat, because if they don't, that's bad management or bad delegating. Someone somewhere should have time within the business. And if, again, there's no time, then there's money. It'll always come back to these three. And you might look at, again, yourself as the person in the business that, if you're only running it yourself, you might feel like I've got no time and no money. Even if it's a spare few $100s, you can hire a VA for 20, 30 hours a week. You can do that. There's always going to be spare money. There's always going to be spare time. And if you don't have those two variables, the business will, in terms of someone you can delegate tasks to or spare money. And that is how you get between each level, because each level requires time investment or money investment, and sometimes both in the end. Obviously, a big system might take time to implement or money to implement. But the way you go from no systems to small systems by having Zapier integrations, using ChatGPT more often, getting an ads person, is going from having maybe no SOPs to having SOPs. And you do that by hiring a VA for a few hours to set up SOPs for you. And then you have a 30-minute to an hour meeting once a week about it. And that is how you scale to each level. And obviously, it gets more complex once you get above like 30 to 50K. You need to have people reviewing SOPs more often. You probably have a manager per person type of thing, but manager per team of people. But these levels are honestly the level between just where you're at working right now if you're a freelancer, up to where you are literally a small family run business or a larger family run business, or you have a larger team of, 3 to 5 contractors or whatever. So if you do want to know more about getting out of this level, even beyond 50K, then let me know, because that's specifically what I help people with. It's a tough challenge, but it's possible. And there's obviously what I was talking about, just working between these 3 lengths here. But ultimately, for the most part, it does still come back to the variables of time and money. You either have time or your team has time, or if no one has time, there's money to be spent, which means spend, if you have a fraction of 10 minutes, get a VA or hire. If you have money, you therefore can buy someone time in terms of VAs or hiring someone or whatever it might be. And that's ultimately, that's the get out of jail card there for your business to be able to scale it. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps in understanding it. And that should really help you be able to get to that next ceiling. And I think, to be honest, I want to quickly end here with the one thing that's the variable, because I didn't really touch very much on 30 to 50K plus. The one variable here, which I'll just kind of extrude from this point, I just put some arrows here, is literally this. And I want to just kind of reference it here very, very simply, but it's going to be, so the E-myth, which is delegation in terms of time and time money. It's going to be franchising as a concept, not necessarily doing it, franchising as a concept. So basically copy plus paste systems. And then ultimately, I think it's being able to creating, actually no, not management, it'll be teams and structures. And I can make another video on this if you want me to, but this is ultimately what Daniel Priestley talks about in Key Person of Influence, which is basically having scalable teams. So it's 10 to 12 people and then 1 manager, and so on and so forth. I can talk about that in another video if you want me to. It kind of dives into other topics that aren't really related to what I'm talking about here. But nonetheless, I would highly recommend you search Key Person of Influence, just Daniel Priestley teams, Daniel Priestley team building, you'll find it. And that is what that is. But either way, I do hope that helps you kind of understand where you can go and what the next steps are. And ultimately, it does come back to just time or money, and getting out of the headspace of it's not just your time or your money. What does the business have available as well? And that's how you can scale the business too. You got to use the resources to be able to get to where you want to get to. So I really hope that helps. And yeah, that's the end of it. Alrighty, so thanks again for watching. If you did find this video valuable, then please do leave a like and consider subscribing, as well as sharing it around to anybody that you think might find this valuable too. And with that being said, I do hope you've enjoyed it once again. And if you do want more help with getting more clients, with actually finding the type of clients you can actually get that are going to help grow the business, then follow the video link in the description. But again, with that being said, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.